Toyota Rav4 XA40. If you look at the aggregate part, then by and large, little has changed. The 2-liter 3ZR-FE gasoline engine remained the same. The new 2AR-FE unit retired the former 2.4, and the two of them made up the company unprecedented for Rav4 diesel 2.22 AD FTV. I have no serious reason to dissuade you from any of the listed motors. Yes, millionaires have not been put here for a long time. However, each of the listed engines, with normal care, is capable of reaching up to 400 TkM without a major overhaul of the piston. Of the problems, they are all united by rather harmless, but still chronic leaks of the cooling pump, that is, the pump. Considering the units separately, it is difficult to argue that it is better to choose 2.52 AR-FE from gasoline engines. Gluttonous, but high torque, resourceful and reliable. Of the weak points, only the clutches for changing the timing phases that are already familiar to Toyota, which, like on the related Camry, can harmlessly chirp at startup. The 2-liter 3ZR-FE sometimes frays the ground wire due to not the most successful location. Also, like 2.5, a 2-liter chain, but the chain turned out to be not the most resourceful. It happens that by 200 TkM it stretches and asks for a replacement. The rest of the motor picky and reliable. Diesel 2AD FTV was marked by oil consumption and a tendency to form carbon deposits. Moreover, solid deposits are quickly formed not only on the surfaces of the combustion chamber, increasing the already inherent lubricant consumption. The EGR gas recirculation valve also clogs the intake cavities with soot, from which they often have to be cleaned, or the valve can be switched off once and for all programmatically, which many Rav4 owners resort to. The turbine itself is here, it does not ask for a drink. If underblowing or overblowing suddenly happens, then the culprit is usually a wedged actuator, approximately like VAG motors. Preventive lubrication with heat-resistant compounds will be very helpful. As is the case with many diesel engines, injectors with a pump are demanding on the quality of diesel fuel and the timing of replacing the fuel filter. Of course, it's also impossible to refuel such a Rav4 anywhere with impunity. Sooner or later such savings will cost an expensive replacement of fuel equipment. But with periodic preventive maintenance and careful operation, the motor is able to serve no less than gasoline engines. Toyota workers are increasingly continuing to aggregate their brainchildren with light and economical Aisin CVTs. The K111F model has already been installed on the previous generation Toyota Rav4 and has earned a good reputation, or rather, this CVT belongs to the cast of one of the most reliable. The variator can only be seen on 2-liter models. Before 200 TkM, you should not worry about it, but with proper care, that is, without overheating and timely oil changes, it is able to leave all 300 TkM. Cases of breakdowns at 50 TkM also happen and, fortunately, very rarely. You can find out about the weak points of the U760F automatic, working with a 2.5-liter unit, in our Toyota Camry review. Let me just say that under the hood of the Rav4, such a box works with no less devotion and dedication, allowing 300 TkM to pass without serious incidents, but again subject to periodic oil changes. Diesel got one of the most problematic boxes, Aisin U660F, known from the Camry sedan from 3.5. That's just under the hood of the Rav4 automatic, surprisingly, behaves more accommodating, even despite the fact that the torque of the heavy fuel 2.2 is similar to the petrol 3.5, and the mass of the car is greater. Probably, low diesel speeds reduce the risk of frying frictions and wear products, while less is formed. With all-wheel drive, there are no malfunctions. Even if you want to find fault with something, you can mention the tendency to blow snot through the rear gear oil seals. And in search of truly weak points, you need to look below, that is, the chassis and steering. The owners of the first batches of Toyota Rav4 XA40 were faced with unexpected warranty replacements for some parts and assemblies with a clearly unfinished design. The most massive problem in the chassis was the trailing arms of the rear suspension. The former soft silent blocks were pierced with a roar in the pits. Instead of them, dealers installed rubber bands without holes. The car becomes stiffer, but without ominous noises in the rear. It is understandable, Toyota owners will always choose the latter between comfort and reliability. The second weak point, eliminated mainly under warranty, was the steering rack, which emits knocks when driving through bumps and when the steering wheel is swayed from side to side. The problem is not so massive, mainly due to the fact that many owners moved from the previous generation Rav4 and took the rattling in the steering column for granted and already familiar. The Rav4's overall suspension life is longer than many of its competitors. The only thing is that the front stabilizer bushings have become a real consumable, often not living up to 50 TkM. Silent blocks of the front levers live for 100 to 130,000 km, shock absorbers for about 150 TkM. The rear suspension after the above-described modernization passes more than 200,000 kilometers without knocking. Brake discs are erased earlier than we would like and hardly walk over the second set of pads. By 50,000 kilometers, the residual thickness, as a rule, is already close to the minimum allowable value. This was not the case with the previous Rav4. Is the quality going downhill? If we take into account that the model is becoming more and more complex, then such a conclusion is quite natural. For example, in terms of units, Toyota rarely comes up with something new, and here, as we can see, everything is very, very reliable, but without improving the electrics and comfort options today, improvements could not go anywhere without a trace. Although, at the same time, nothing particularly terrible happened. The first versions of Rav4 were seen in the independent life of the electric trunk lid. Sometimes it doesn't open completely, sometimes it doesn't close. In such cases, it is usually necessary to change a rather expensive door control unit. Fortunately, the manufacturer eliminated the defect in time, and this did not lead to mass protests of motorists for the right to drive a reliable car. The regular head unit also sometimes crashes and freezes, but it just needs a firmware update from you. This is not for you to solder the board, like the price competitor Hyundai Santa Fe. Some car enthusiasts have experienced premature battery death in the first 2 years of ownership. It seems that there are many factors. The alarm system could have contributed, or the harsh Russian winters. However, experts in electronics argue that the point is not in additional equipment and even in the battery itself, but in a banal insufficient charge in positive temperatures. What is even more interesting, this is not treated in any way, since it is so conceived by the manufacturer himself for our benefit. After getting acquainted with the weaknesses of the latest Toyotas, many are interested in the question of corrosion. Does it rot or does it not rot? In the case of Rav4, everything is not so critical. The chips that have appeared on the hood and arches, of course, are better to grease with something. However, pockets of rust on the body panels just don't pop up. Either there was a chip or scratch, or an accident. There is some trouble with the Toyota Rav4 optics. The headlights are sometimes misleading when trying to determine the real mileage by indirect signs. After 50,000 kilometers they become cloudy, as if the mileage is all 300,000. When buying a car, it is better to immediately buy a protective film or varnish. The rear lights, in turn, were often replaced for warranty replacements due to the unexpected appearance of streaks on the inside of the optics. Door stops quickly stop fixing intermediate positions. In principle, this will be another nostalgia for those who owned the previous generation of the model. The rear view camera is also traditionally for Toyota quickly covered with a scattering of scratches and a field of 100,000 kilometers of operation. Even an absolutely clean lens creates the feeling that the lens is covered with a layer of dirt. From this moment on, you have to navigate by parking sensors or try to polish the camera. It's sad to look at the Toyota Rav4 salon after 100,000 kilometers. Interior materials are mostly frankly cheap. Even after 50,000 kilometers, the steering wheel is already decently wiped, the sidewall of the driver's seat is pressed through, and the seat cushion foam rubber is slowly beginning to crumble. A few photos from inspections of used cars before buying. Crickets from the center console are also not long in coming. All this must be taken into account when determining the mileage by indirect signs. Since there is no other way, the mileage is not prescribed here in any of the control units. Even diagnostics with a dealer scanner are useless in this regard. Only experience and intuition will help. Yes, Toyota is no longer the same and has become one for a long time. This is an inevitable part of the development and complexity of systems. There will be little problems, however, thanks to the ancient units. Rav4 to this day does not force you to worry about overhauls of the main components. Even with a variator that has traveled 150,000 kilometers, it still leaves a chance for, if not the most comfortable, but a carefree future. True, if you need uncompromising reliability without regard to fuel consumption, then it is better to opt for the insanely expensive version on the used market with a 2.5 and a traditional automatic. Want to spend less? I won't dissuade you from a diesel either, but you should expect that sooner or later he will take all the savings during maintenance. So choose. By the way, the choice on the used Toyota Rav4 XA40 market is quite large, but really good specimens do not stagnate on sale for weeks. A lot of hackneyed cars, with twisted mileage and even technically dead options. Do not skimp on a good check of a car before buying or a quality auto selection.